Hello, my name is Ryan Borland from Rambling University, and today I will be talking about emotional abuse of a child. What is it and how to report? Our topics today will be what is emotional abuse, what are the indicators of abuse, when and how to report, some practice scenarios, and finally, my references. So what is emotional abuse? Emotional abuse includes acts or omissions by parents and caregivers that have caused or could cause serious behavioral, cognitive, emotional, or mental disorders. So that's a pretty broad range, which makes emotional abuse the most difficult to identify. A few reasons why it is more difficult to identify emotional abuse than other abuse is, first off, some effects of emotional abuse can be present in children who have not had emotional maltreatment. This can include speech or learning problems or other disorders that involve physical development lacks that can also be present in those that have not sustained any type of abuse. Second, the effects may only become evident in later developmental stages of a child's life. So we might see something that may be looking like abuse, but if we base our judgment off of the child's outcome and, well, it doesn't look like the child was that affected, they may not be affected in that moment and it might have an effect later on in life. Lastly, the behaviors of emotional abused children and emotionally disturbed children can be very similar. And the main difference between the two is emotional abuse is coming from the parent and is an abusive type of communication, while emotionally disturbed children are just children who have regular disturbances, not due to the fault of the parent and how they are being treated. Abuse also has a major impact in a child's development, and some of the long-term consequences can be low self-esteem, social anxiety, low school performance, and in the immediate notice of abuse, it can also be a signal of other types of abuse that may be present. So when looking at it, we want to ask ourselves in our daily situations and jobs, how do I know that it's abuse and what indicators can I look for? And also determining if it's emotional disturbance or emotional abuse. The first question, do the parents recognize the existence of the problem? If they do not, this may be a sign of abuse or a sign to look further into it. Do the parents blame the child or ignore the problem completely? If so, this is another red flag for abuse. Do the parents show concern for the child's well-being? If they do not, this is a major red flag for abuse. And this can be something as simple as, well, I don't care what happens to him. That alone can also be an issue. And most importantly, are other forms of abuse present? If so, emotional abuse is automatically also present. So emotional abuse does not have to be by itself. It is typically a way that we can see that abuse, since parents can often hide the other types of abuse. One other important fact is domestic violence in the presence of a child may be reported as emotional abuse. Although it's not mandated unless the child injury occurred, you do still have the ability to report it. Some of the red flags for emotional abuse to look for in child behaviors can be if the child is frightened of going home or scared of parents or caretakers, is clingy or indiscriminate attachments to unrelated adults. So if he is clinging to those that are typically not his primary caregivers or those that he might automatically be comfortable with and is looking for protection, that can be a sign. Self-abusive behaviors and being socially withdrawn. And these are just a few. And the parental behavior red flags are if there's parental depression or mental illness, unrealistic expectations of the child, the parent is unduly harsh or rigid about child rearing, parent singles out one child as bad or evil, berates, humiliates, or belittles the child, or is indifferent to the child, especially when they are in need, so ignoring the child when crying. So as a whole, looking at all of these as an entire system of what the parent is doing and what the child is doing, take a look at those type of situations and those type of behaviors when looking at emotional abuse. So lastly, let's say you see some situation that you might think needs to be reported. Well, when to report for California? First off, it's pretty simple. When a legally mandated reporter has knowledge of or observes a child being abused or reasonably suspects abuse is present, then a report must be done. If you're unsure still if abuse is occurring, still report it. You are not required to provide proof of the abuse, only your observation, as long as you have reasonable suspect that abuse is occurring. Now when you know when to report, and now you are ready to report, this is to whom you should report. Mandated reporters must make their report to a child protective agency. What is a child protective agency? It can be your county welfare department, such as Department of Children and Family Services, probation department, police, or sheriff's department. These are the only departments that will be acceptable for reporting, and it is the mandated reporter's responsibility to ensure the report goes through. So here's the timeline for reporting in California, and it's a two-step process. Step 1, report by phone. This must be done immediately. Who would you report to? You report to a child protective agency or, as mentioned before, a law enforcement agency. And these are the reporting numbers for Orange County. What do you provide in your report? You'll provide the name of the reporter, yourself, name of the child, present location of the child, the nature of abuse, and any other information including what led to the suspect of abuse. Then there's step 2, submitting a written report. Now this must be submitted within 36 hours of the phone report. And you want to submit to the same agency to which the phone report was originally made. And it must be filed on a DOJ form SS8572, which is known as the Suspected Child Abuse Report Form. And the forms are available, of course, at the link provided. And remember, mandated reporters who report in good faith are protected. So you are free of any immunity from state criminal or civil liability for reporting as required, even if the mandated reporter acquired the knowledge or reasonable suspicion of the abuse outside of his or her professional capacity. So when in doubt, you are protected when you report. After reporting, the agency might also provide an update on the investigation outcome, if applicable. Lastly, there are some practice scenarios. So here's scenario number 1. Is it reportable or not? You are a mental health worker at a local elementary school. You noticed a student named Cecilia has been socially withdrawn and her mother does not see any issue. One day, Cecilia's mom drops her off and says, "You better stop being evil today. I swear you are no good and I wish I did not even have to pick you back up." Is this abuse? And is it reportable? Answer, yes. Her mother is talking very negatively and in a way that is harmful to the child. So absolutely, it is reportable. It is not your job to investigate it further, just to report it. Scenario number 2. When working in an after-school program, Tommy, a 6-year-old boy, does not want to go home when mom arrives to pick him up. Earlier that day, Tommy hit a girl and told you, "That's what my dad does to my mom when I'm bad." He also says his father laughs at him when he practices reading. Is this reportable? Answer, yes. There are signs of not only domestic abuse in front of a child, there's also parental humiliation of the child, which falls in lines with emotional abuse. Once again, it is our job to investigate it, simply to report it, especially because of those two situations together. So last but not least, we've discussed what is emotional abuse, the indicators of abuse, when and how to report. We've practiced a couple of scenarios. So with all this together, I hope that you now have the tools that you need to know that regardless, as long as you have a suspicion, a reasonable suspicion, it is our best and our duty to report. And last but not least, these are my references. Thank you.